Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to Division 46 webinar series. This is Dr. Jerry Lynn Hogg, the current president of Division 46, the Society for Media Psychology and Technology. And we're really honored today to have Dr. Ryan Niemiec here. He's an educational director for the VIA Institute on Character, a global nonprofit that advances the science and practice of character strengths. He's the author of several books, including Mindfulness and Character Strengths, A Practical Guide to Flourishing, and co-author with Danny Wedding, another one of our Division 46 members, of Positive Psychology at the Movies and Mental Illness. Ryan is an award-winning psychologist. He's an international workshop leader and is the adjunct professor or faculty at the following universities or organizations: Xavier University in Cincinnati, know it well, I'm from Dayton, University of Pennsylvania, IE University in Madrid, Whole Being Institute, and the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. He's going to speak to us today on reaching the masses using Happify online to teach the science of character, strength, mindfulness, and well-being. And Ryan, I'm going to just turn it over to you to go on about what you're going to speak on today.
Fantastic. Well, my deep gratitude goes to you, Jerry Lynn, for setting up this very innovative and exciting series here in media psychology and for Division 46. Such an important division of the American Psychological Association, and I'm just really honored and pleased to be able to present as part of your series here. Also, thanks to you, Tanisha, for really setting up and doing a lot of the groundwork for this as well. So very exciting things happening here in Division 46. So let me first give a full disclosure here that the VIA Institute on Character, where I work, has a relationship with Happify. So certainly I have an appreciation and fondness for Happify and the work that they do. So I just wanted to say that up front in giving this presentation. And what I'd like to do here is to first give a little bit of background on mindfulness and character strengths. Very, very short background, just so that everybody's on the same page, since these are quite robust concepts in psychology, positive psychology, and related fields, and bring everybody on the same page with that. And then I'll dig into Happify and what Happify is doing and how we're able to reach the masses with some of this work around these constructs in positive psychology. So we'll go ahead and begin with a little bit of background on VIA and VIA character strengths. So VIA is this word that actually in Latin means bridge or the path. And it's originally stood for values in action. And this is something that is really at the core of positive psychology, which is the science of well-being. And VIA, it means several different things for us. It's a nonprofit organization, it's a classification of human strengths, and it's a measurement tool. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those three briefly. So first of all, it's a nonprofit organization called the VIA Institute on Character, and we're located downtown Cincinnati. And our job is actually to advance the science and practice of character strengths. So our job is to really try to push researchers and practitioners forward in being able to study this work and apply this work. And in the last 10 to 15 years, there's actually been hundreds of peer-reviewed studies using the VIA survey and studying these character strengths that I'll be telling you more about. So very exciting work in terms of applying this work in fields like business and education, psychology, coaching, and our topic today, which is kind of reaching consumers, reaching the general public. So when I mention character strengths, I'm actually referring to this VIA classification that hopefully all of you are quite familiar with. And so this is really at the heart of positive psychology. So when Seligman was putting forth this mission to help psychology balance itself out more, to not just look at what's wrong with people and studying psychopathology and helping people overcome disorders, but to also look more deeply at the science around well-being and around character strengths and positive institutions. When he was putting that forth to psychologists to bring more of that balance, one of the areas that he particularly emphasized was positive traits or positive character. And so my boss, Neil Mayerson, who's a psychologist and the chairman of the VIA Institute, and Marty connected, and they gathered several different scientific meetings over a period of a couple years and catalyzed this movement, this science of character, back around the year 2000. And this was really a 3-year study led by scientist Chris Peterson, who together with 55 researchers looked throughout time, throughout history, across the great religions, the great philosophers, educators who have written about virtue and strength throughout the centuries, really, and looked for common themes. What did these scientists, what did these philosophers like Aristotle and Plato, what did they have to say about a life of flourishing? And what did they say about what constitutes a good life, or what constitutes a meaningful life or a happy life for people? And what they found across these religions and philosophies was very common threads. And you see those common threads on the left side of the VIA classification there. These are the virtues of the VIA classification. And then in applying various criteria and further study, the 24 character strengths were noted to nest under these particular virtues. So this VIA classification was put forth back in 2004 and really is viewed as a consensual nomenclature, or in other words, a common language for talking about what's best in people. That really for the first time in history, we have something that helps to frame what's best in people. We never had something like this before, where it's something that really gathers and brings together the common positive psychological ingredients that are in all human beings. So these 24 character strengths have been found to be in all human beings, and they're malleable to a degree, and they're found across cultures. Researchers went to very remote areas on this planet in the early days of this work. So went up to northern Greenland and spoke with the Inuit people and the Maasai tribal people in Africa, and Western countries and Eastern countries and so on, to really see if these strengths really were present, and if there's rituals to build them up, and if they're morally valued in different cultures, and if they're trait-like and consistent in the person, and so on, and finding strong consistency for these 24 strengths. So that's the VIA classification. That's what the scientists put forth in 2004, along with this. And this is what any science needs. If the science is emerging and has a classification, it needs some kind of tool for measuring that. And so this is the VIA survey of strengths. So this VIA survey is online and free, and meets good reliability and validity standards as a psychological test. And it measures these 24 character strengths. People take it online, and then they get a rank order from 1 to 24 of their strengths. And it's meant as an ipsative measure, so really looking at your own personal rank order rather than for comparative purposes, saying like it's not meant to say you're higher in curiosity than all of your friends, or you're less creative than your coworkers, but instead it's meant to see what are your best qualities, what are you uniquely highest in, what makes up who you are, your unique constellation of strengths. And so that's what this measure does. And because it's free and because it offers something of value to people, and it's so easily accessible with today's media, it's been taken very quickly by over 3 million people, reached every country around the world. We've had the generosity of people from 35 countries that have translated it into various languages, going through a very rigorous translation process. And so it's been very good. There's also a VIA youth survey that is available for people between the ages of 10 and 17. That's been translated in not nearly as many languages, maybe 7 to 10 languages. So that's the VIA survey of character strengths. So that's a little primer on VIA, and I won't go into all the many research studies on that, but I'll just say that character strengths have been associated with significance with happiness, with less depression, with greater work productivity, greater work performance, with more engagement, with more work as a calling in life, with better self-esteem, with better relationships and intimacy, with better achievement and accomplishments, with more meaning in life. And the list goes on and on across the hundreds of findings. We have those actually scientific findings summarized on our website. If you go to viacharacter.org, you can see those and you can see the citations for them as well. Okay, so now a brief primer, an even briefer one, on mindfulness. So this has been a topic of interest for me for a good 15 to 20 years, kind of before mindfulness has really exploded even much more on the consumer scene and on the scientific scene. I've always been interested in mindfulness as a psychologist, to be able to really bring my clients to look in a very clear way and in a deep way at their suffering, and to be able to face their suffering in a very honest way, and then to be able to transcend that suffering as well by looking more clearly, by having particular mindfulness tools and approaches, really helping them, as we say in the mindfulness world, to shift in their relationship with themselves, to not just kind of shift in something like their thinking or in their feelings, but actually shift in just how they view themselves and how they relate to themselves. That's ultimately what mindfulness is really trying to do. So mindfulness has exploded on the scene of research, and many people are defining it in all sorts of different ways. And so mindfulness scientists gathered in the early 2000s really with the intention of scouring the research, scouring what's known about mindfulness, and trying to come up with an operational definition that then future scientists, researchers, practitioners, educators could go by. So again, everybody's on the same page. And so they did this, and they put forth this paper in a clinical psychology science and practice journal. And it was actually a two-part definition represented by these photos here. So one part is that mindfulness involves the self-regulation of our attention. Second, it involves taking an attitude of curiosity, openness, and acceptance with whatever we're putting our attention on. It could be something in the present moment. It could be something in the past, in the future. So let me say a little bit more about that. So it's the self-regulation of your attention. So that means that you're taking control of your attention and where you're placing it. So you might decide to place it on your breath. You might decide to place it on your environment if you're in nature. You might decide to put it on the piece of food that you're putting in your mouth and attending to the texture. You might decide to put it on the movement and rhythm of your body and the muscles involved in each step that you take. You might decide to put it on your loved one's face as you're talking with them and observing their smile and listening to their words. So it's all about you self-regulating and taking control of your attention. And it's also about being open to what's there, whether that's something wonderful or something horrible or something that's neutral, being open to that, being curious about it. So you're kind of taking this orientation of questioning, of exploring, of pursuing. And you're accepting that. You're saying that this is okay in this particular moment. I can accept this is just the reality in this second. Not necessarily forever, but in this moment, this is how things are. So that's what the scientists came up with for the definition of mindfulness. And back in 2002, 2004, when this was published, I was very pleased that this encompasses two of the VIA character strengths. Self-regulation, which is under the temperance virtue, all about controlling our vices, and then curiosity being the other character strength, which is under the wisdom virtue, which helps us to acquire knowledge and to apply our knowledge. So I've been very interested in both of these topics and have been in a unique position as the education director of the VIA Institute to really be on top of the latest science with character strengths and ways to apply that science. And then having been a longtime mindfulness practitioner, leading hundreds of mindfulness groups for therapy clients and for the general public, I felt I was in a unique position to bring the two together. These being two of the hottest topics in the science of positive psychology, I thought they were kind of natural bedfellows and that each could impact the other in a very unique way. And so I began a study of that and how they might integrate. And I tested it out with groups, and I had people across other cultures test out these concepts in their own unique culture. And then that work culminated to this book, Mindfulness and Character Strengths, in 2004, Practical Guide to Flourishing. And essentially, I talk about how you can really integrate this work in really one of two ways. One is when we're bringing our character strengths to mindfulness. And we might call this strong mindfulness, because we're making our mindfulness stronger. We're making our self-regulation abilities stronger when we bring our character strengths to the table. And so how many people out there have tried to maintain some kind of meditation practice or some kind of self-regulation practice with self-hypnosis or with relaxation, whatever it might be, and then have struggled and have given up on it? It's one of the most common things that people report when they hear about mindfulness or meditation. And they say, oh, that's not for me. My mind wanders too much. Or, I don't have time for that. I don't have the luxury to meditate, people will say. Or I just can't do it. I can't get into it like you can get into it. And really all those are just excuses, or the nicer way to say it is they're all obstacles. They're all obstacles getting in the way of one's attention in the present moment. So then I would argue, why not turn to your best qualities inside you? Scientists have this, as I said, this common language that they've been able to assemble, that we've learned from these great virtue leaders and ethics leaders and strengths leaders throughout the centuries. And these common ingredients of creativity and bravery and perseverance and forgiveness and gratitude, this language, why not turn to your own unique strengths? Your highest strengths, we call those signature strengths. Why not turn to those and apply those to overcome your obstacles, to overcome that challenge with finding time to be mindful or of dealing with your mind wandering? So that's what I refer to when I say we're bringing character strengths to our mindfulness, helping really to bring more of ourselves into the meditation experience is what's going on. Then the other way to integrate, just kind of in practical terms, is to say, okay, well, how can mindfulness help our strengths practice? So you might be somebody that's very interested in trying to become more forgiving, or a more grateful person, or a more spiritual person, or a better team player, or better with your leadership, or become more fair in your life, or just more authentically yourself, which would be to use your signature strengths more. So to be more authentic. Probably most people and most people's clients would fall into one of those categories. And so why not use mindfulness to do that? I don't know of a better way to use our strengths than to use the lens of mindfulness to help us to do that. Because mindfulness helps us to see things more clearly. It helps us to be sensitive to the context that we're in, the way that we might be applying our character strengths. It helps us to break through our blind spots, because often we're not very aware of our character strengths, or that we even have these character strengths. And research has shown that mindfulness helps us to overcome biases within ourselves and overcome those obstacles. And so we can use that mindfulness then to apply our strengths and to be sensitive with how we're going to use our creativity in the workplace, or how we're going to bring forth a bit more fairness in this sensitive situation, or how we're going to elevate our critical thinking or our wisdom, and so on. So these are the two ways that we might integrate. These are what I talk about in the book and give a research basis for it. And then I outline an 8-week program for basically doing these two things and for bringing character strengths and mindfulness together. Saying all that mouthful in just a sentence, I would say mindfulness can be a lens for your character strengths, and character strengths can be a lens for your mindfulness. That would be an easy way to sum it up. Okay, so now that we have a bit of a primer and a little bit of a background on mindfulness and character strengths, the idea is to apply those concepts that I've just been laying out to be able to help the masses, to be able to reach so many more people. I love being able to help people in a one-on-one situation and in group therapy and in classes and courses I teach, and it's very meaningful and wonderful. But then I also like this idea, as so many of us in the media world or that are interested in Division 46 want to do, which is to bring this to a wide group of people, to be able to properly educate the general public, to be able to teach the public about reducing stigma for people with mental illness, or to be able to teach people about really, in this case, what is the science of happiness having to say? Or what are these character strengths and how can you use them? So that's part of the reason I'm particularly interested in the work that Happify is doing. And so Happify is this very new web-based and app-based service, just simply happify.com, that really specifically is all about taking the science of happiness, and explicitly the science of happiness. Not that you don't look at other sciences, but it starts with the science, that this isn't just kind of some kind of general way self-help thing. I mean, it does offer self-help, but it's science-based self-help. So it's taking that science of what is the research saying about positive relationships? What's the research saying about how we can achieve more in our life? What's the research saying about positive finances and managing our finances better? Or about strengths, meaning flow, mindfulness, meditation, whatever. And let's make this fun for people. Let's make it engaging for people. Let's offer activities that people are likely to do to then help themselves. So that's what Happify is all about. Using technology to make people's lives better is a simple way to think about it. 2 million people have been engaging this process in the last 2 years on the Happify site. And so to share with you a little more, the Happify offers what's called tracks. So this is how the material and the content is delivered to the to any user. And so it's choosing those topic areas that people most want to improve within themselves. So maybe it's becoming more productive at work or happier at work, or maybe it's learning to be able to relate better to their partner in life, or maybe it's about trying to find new techniques for career development, or whatever it might be, dealing with their stress in more productive ways. And so the content is delivered through these tracks, and I'll show you in a moment what those tracks look like. But to give you an overview, there's been about 40 tracks developed on the site now, many different wonderful authors. Here's a listing of some of the track authors among the 40. So anyone that's done any work with couples or followed any kind of research with couples knows John Gottman's work. He's the leading figure in the world in that topic and has been doing research with couples for between 2 and 3 decades. And so he has a track on applying this work for healthy relationships. Barbara Fredrickson is the leading figure in positive emotions, the science of positive emotions, has a great book that just came out called Love 2.0. Sean Acker is a very popular psychologist from Harvard that has a TED Talk that I think has been seen by 20 million people, something like that. A whole lot of people. Rick Hansen is a neuropsychologist, quite popular. Gretchen Rubin has the Happiness Project. Sonia Luber-Mirsky is a researcher in happiness. And Sharon Salzberg is a leading figure in loving kindness meditation. So these are some of the authors. Some of the more popular tracks in Happify, you can see down in the left corner, deal with problems. So this isn't just kind of some fluffy, let's just kind of put a smiley face on things and be happy. This is about taking the science that's of what we know so far. It's still a lot to learn, but what we know so far about boosting happiness and character strengths and so on, and then applying it to what's wrong, to applying it to our suffering, applying it to our struggles. So you can see the most popular tracks out of the 40 plus are, one is called Conquer Your Negative Thoughts, something that all psychologists help clients with. And then another one, Cope Better with Stress. So kind of interesting that those are 2 of the most popular. Here is some general data on Happify that they passed on to me. I think this is also noted on their site. But just kind of showing some of the boost to happiness that users get as they engage in the Happify content. I know that there's a strong correlation between the frequency of use. So people that use it, I believe it's every 2 or 3 days, have even more substantial happiness than people that use it less frequently. But you can see that in a matter of 2 weeks, about 70% of people that use it frequently in those 2 weeks get happier. So not much time for doing something that's fun that then has a big boost on your well-being. The measurement for happiness is a unique measurement for Happify, but it's based in psychometric tests in happiness, and is developed by a researcher named Acacia Parks, who developed the test for Happify. I believe that their own internal breakdown is for happiness is they get a total score, and they get scores for life satisfaction, which is subjective ratings of one's happiness, and they have ratings for positive emotions. So when users come on the site, they're members of the site, they frequently reassess their happiness. Just like we would actually ask our clients to, when we reassess their depression or their anxiety every time that we meet them, and maybe we give them the Beck depression inventory, the Beck anxiety as a way of rechecking with them, or the Hamilton or something. I would also always, Beck, as a practicing psychologist in St. Louis, I would frequently give my clients the Beck, but I'd also give them a measure of happiness, very general subjective measure on happiness or life satisfaction, usually the one by Ed Diener, which is 5 questions. It's called the Satisfaction with Life Scale. He actually developed it back in 1985, and now has probably more studies on happiness than probably anybody in the world, and his measures are used actually to measure the happiness of countries, even. So I would give my clients something very short and quick like that to get a general overview, and then if needed, give them more detailed measures, like there's flourishing scales and other positive emotion scales and ratings and things like that, to kind of track the client's progress, not only in boosting their well-being, but also in managing and hopefully lowering their ill-being or their depression and so on. So to be able to balance things out, we always want to be able to balance things, have both sides of the coin, not only in our assessment, but our diagnosis and our treatment. So now I'm going to take that, and we're going to look more closely at one of the tracks. So the one that I happen to know most about, because it's the one I created, and it's on these concepts of bringing mindfulness and character strengths together, which can be a little bit tricky because this was one of the first mindfulness tracks, and I think the first character strengths track on the site. So I had to try to find a user-friendly way to bring forth mindfulness concepts and character strengths concepts and bring them together. So the title of the track is Awaken Your Potential with Mindfulness. And as I said before, this is adapted from the 8-week program that's in my book. So the book actually goes through the research and the practice of mindfulness and character strengths and how to integrate them. The last third of the book is actually a manual for leading an 8-week program for boosting mindfulness and strengths. And so then what I did for this track is I kind of reformulated a lot of the exercises, moved things around, added some new things, added some new meditations, took things out, always with the lens of how can I help consumers with this program? What will consumers be engaged in? What will they be interested in? So we basically changed everything, but kept the same themes and some of the same concepts for this particular track. So all the tracks, and I'll show you an image on the next screen, have 4 parts. Somewhere around 36 total activities if you were to go through everything. And so that includes games that Happify has integrated in there. It includes audio meditations and so on. I went in the studio and created 10 new audio tracks, just audio meditations just for this track. Some quite a bit shorter than the track, the CD that's in my book. And it integrates in the Happify games. All the tracks also have social media components. So the idea is always that we can improve a lot by trying on our own to engage in activities and exercises and journaling and self-reflection. But ultimately, we're social animals, and there's something very powerful about positive relationships. Research in positive psychology points that is really the most important element in terms of a pathway to well-being, is really cultivating positive, healthy relationships. So that has to be a component of the tracks because it's so important to our well-being. And so there's social media where you can share any of your journals. You can keep them private or share them. You can share any of the activities, what you found, ask people questions, and so on. So here is an image of one of the parts of my track. So that, as it says here, part one is breaking free from your automatic pilot. So in the mindfulness lingo, we use automatic pilot to refer to how we get caught in the general, mundane, everyday motions of life, and we're not really paying much attention to what we're doing, and we're not really noticing what's going on around us because we're just living out of our routines. And sometimes, if you take that to a little bit more extreme, scientists use the term languishing, that we're certainly not flourishing in life where we have a lot of social and psychological well-being. Instead, we're languishing. We're just kind of going through the motions. We're struggling. We're certainly in the precursors of a more serious mental problem. And so automatic pilot is that. And of course, I won't go into everything on automatic pilot. There's certainly many good benefits to automatic pilot as well. But with mindfulness, we want to be able to at least notice our automatic pilot and be able to break free from sort of the clutches of mindlessness and full distractedness. And so that's what this part one is. And so this part one, as you can see, has 8 activities. And Happify does a good job at the arrangements which they set up. And so mixing in, again, for the consumer, to make it user-friendly and fun for the consumer, you start off with an activity, a kind of a journaling type activity, a reflection activity. Then you do a quiz, and you can usually choose from 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. And then after you do a couple activities, new ones open up. So you wouldn't actually see all 8 of these at once. You can see there's a fun activity called Uplift, which is one that seems quite simple, but you end up getting a bit addicted to it, where all these different balloons come up with different positive emotion or negative emotion words. And the idea is to use your cursor and to pop, or actually to point at each of the balloons that are more positive. And you get points if you hit the positive ones, you lose points if you hit the negative ones. So that's kind of meant as a fun activity, a bit of a learning activity, getting you familiar with the positive language and words you might not use in your everyday life that you could use. But it's also meant as kind of a break in between activities to keep kind of the engagement going. I'll show you a sample of a poll later. Negativity Knockout is another game. So these games are just integrated into each part of the track for people. And at least in my track, there's the mindfulness meditations on character strengths that are woven in as well. Here's a little bit more data. I was just really surprised and pleased that in the first few days of this track, when it launched, there was 1,000 users that had engaged in the track, that started it and started to work through some of these activities since June. So just a few months, well over 16,000 people, I think it's getting close to 17,000 now, have joined the track. It doesn't mean that all those people finished the track or they did all 30 or 40 activities, however many it is, but they've engaged in some of the material. They've begun to cultivate some mindfulness, some character strengths language, some benefit to themselves through this track. So that's just a great honor for me to be able to see that. It's a bit mind-boggling. I'll write a blog post for Psychology Today, and I'll be so pleased when, a couple of weeks ago, one of the posts hit 10,000 people in a day, but that's very atypical. Usually I might only get a couple or a few thousand throughout the life of that particular blog post. So to be able to be reaching 16,000 people and to know that they're engaging in some of these well-being activities to some degree is, I can't really comprehend. I can't get my mind around that, but that's the nature of this kind of work and today's world. So And at this point, it's been the most popular track on mindfulness and meditation on Happify. Here's some of the demographics. You can see, you might think, oh, this is just for the millennials, this kind of stuff. But as you can see, under the age distribution there, it's a pretty even distribution throughout the main age brackets. A bit more higher for those that are between 25 and 45. But a lot of people are kind of engaging it. More women at this point, unemployed and employed. I sometimes get emails from people that are unemployed. They're engaging this track and talking about how it's giving them a sense of empowerment to be able to kind of go back and get back in the job hunt, and to be able to realize they have character strengths they can bring to the table for searching for jobs and so on. Now I want to go through, before I conclude, to go through a couple different activities that are specifically on the track. So in terms of a little Happify data point here, 80% of people, that you can rate based on a Likert scale, how much you enjoy or don't enjoy a particular activity. And these were, I guess, the three activities that people most enjoyed, and they put so 80% put a lot or more for this for these activities. So here's an activity. This is what it would look like. I'm sorry I didn't make this more dynamic. It's simply a screenshot. But there's various things the person would click on. So you can hit that drop-down menu where it says mindful listening and choose from 2 or 3 activities that help the person delve into living in the moment. So they choose whatever one they like, and they follow the activity. Sometimes the activity is something you do right then and there, and then you journal about it. Sometimes it's something you might step away from your computer and do for a short amount of time and then come back. What I also like about Happify is if you click on why it works down there in the bottom right corner, it will take you to a description of the scientific backing for whatever the activity is. And then you'll see the APA research citations for all of them. So again, staying where this work of positive psychology is, which is it's first and foremost a science. And Happify just happens to be trying to make that science more practical for people. Rather than being lost in a scholarly journal that 5 people read, instead 50,000 people engage in the activity that has the scientific base. So a big shift there. And then you can see in the very bottom right corner, you can share the activity. There's other ways to engage in social media at each one. So this activity gets into not only becoming a better mindful listener, but then as you're tuning in to that person, that you're listening to what they're saying and hearing their content and observing their nonverbals, but then you're also saying, well, what character strengths am I using as I'm listening? Am I a kind listener? Am I a curious listener? Am I a fair listener, giving them plenty of time? Am I self-regulated in the sense that I'm not trying to think of what I'm going to say next? I'm kind of holding back and being present. So you can apply probably any of the 24 character strengths to mindful listening. So that's what that activity is, and the person to explore their own unique strengths. Another one of the popular activities is this one about appreciation and thankfulness, and how really all of the character strengths are like seeds within us that we can develop and grow. But that same thing applies to other people, and that we can help other people to grow their seeds of character strengths and build those up. And so this activity is trying to build off of that idea, and it's trying to build from the new science of strengths appreciation that's been emerging, not only of strengths appreciation among people in the workplace, but also among couples. And research is finding that couples who can recognize and appreciate strengths in one another have happier marriages and a lot of other benefits. So that's the strengths appreciation exercise. And then here's one more exercise that people tend to like, spending time on some kind of valuable activity. And so we offer 3 different examples of strengths and strength spotting in doing that. And strength spotting is important. Really, it's a first step for people that are interested in character strengths to begin to do this process of spotting your own strengths or spotting the strengths in other people. People spot their own strengths by taking the VIA survey. It's actually now offered on the Happify site, so everybody has the opportunity to take the VIA survey through the Happify site. It's a shorter version, and then those results actually are thrown into the exercises, and they help populate and to point people to certain things on the site and so on. And so here, there's the emphasis also in spotting strengths in other people or in the media. And so Danny Wedding and I have a popular book called Positive Psychology of the Movies, where we go through 1,500 movie examples of how positive elements such as character strengths and resilience and mindfulness and engagement come up in movies and how we can spot them. So we ask people to do this activity because it's quite fun to do. And so that's one of the choices that they have. I think another choice is for them to spot strengths in books that they are interested in or that they're reading in the moment, whether it's a fiction or nonfiction book. There's certainly strength spotting exercises around mindful communication as well throughout the track. Now, I believe every part of the 4-part track has a poll or a quiz. I think I wrote 4 quizzes and 4 polls for this. So here's just one example of a poll. And these are actually, as I've taken other tracks, they're very interesting to see what the general user says. So across about 1,000 people, this was just in the first month, I believe. So I don't know what the numbers are now, but you ask this question: what benefit do you most hope from doing this track, basically, from improving your mindfulness and strengths? And I was very curious about it, and almost half the people say it is about happiness for me. So people, as much as sometimes people want to criticize happiness and the smiley face, it ultimately is what so many people are looking for, and it is correlated with health and all of these different benefits. And actually, it's causal with many of those elements as well, such as health. And then, a fair amount of people say, I want to actually achieve more of my goals. I want to have better relationships and so on. So then there's some research points on why this matters. You click on that little citation there, A-111, and that will take you right to the APA reference with a further explanation of why this matters. So that's the way the quizzes work. In which there is a right answer out of 4 choices, and that's the way these polls work. Here's what happens in social media on these tracks. This is one, I cut out the user's name, but this is one of the things that someone said back in July when taking this track. So basically, they're finding that it's important for them to note and to name their strengths, and that they go on to say how there's someone who's struggled in different ways, and being able to tap into one or more of their strengths, realizing that they have these, has been able to help give them pause and to give them some benefit in improving their relationships. So I want to pause there and see if there's any questions that people have. And I also want to say that you're welcome to email me with any comments or questions. I'll leave the email and the VIA website right there. The next step, really, if you're interested in this work, is certainly to take the VIA survey. So to go to viacharacter.org and take it and give it to your clients and the people in your workshops and so on. And also to spend time perusing Happify.com. There's things that are free on the site that you can peruse, and you can do some of the games and tracks. And then they, of course, ultimately want you to become a user on their site, and you pay some yearly fee, and then you have access to everything. So spend time perusing the Happify site as well.
Oh,
So,
Brian, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And yes, I've actually taken the signature strength test several times, and it's really helped me. I find it very helpful to understand, and it also gives you some. I went, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
We do have a chat area for those of you that might want to ask a question but don't have access to audio. We'll go ahead and open it up to questions or comments or discussion points to folks.
Hi, this is Tanisha. I'll jump in and say thank you. This was really, really awesome. And what it had reminded me of instantly was Julia Cameron's book, The Artist Way. It's called like a spiritual path to higher creativity. And a mentor of mine in grad school at San Diego State I was there, and my background's in media production, and I was doing screenwriting and video editing and stuff like that. And my writing mentor told me to get this book, and it's a psychological self-help book, essentially, like at the end of the day, but it goes through a 12-week like workshop also in there, where each week it's having you do different things, but it starts off with, you have to write a contract to yourself. Like, all right, I'm going to get through these 12 weeks. And it's really, I think like the subtitle, I even have it right now. It's a course in discovering and recovering your creative self. And it goes through like a 12-week kind of process, and has like different tracks, like you were describing, where, you know, after the contract that you write to yourself, you go through like, all right, what's recovering your sense of identity, and then your strength, and then your power and your safety and stuff like that. So it's really learning what your character strengths are that you're talking about, and looking to like unlock that creative artist that's, you know, that's in everybody, because oftentimes we get in our own way. We're our biggest enemy. So this is something that in the beginning I couldn't finish, but I kept going back to, and then I eventually finished it. And I think this book came out in like the late 90s. So it's not even, you know, very up to date, but it's still something that we could revisit. And so I guess my question is Happify something that you could repeat as well and like go back to? Because I see a lot of similarities in terms of like what its aim and mission is about, like finding, you know, what your strengths are personally, and looking at it in others, and recognizing something in someone else doesn't mean that you're absence of that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing that. And I think there is a lot of parallel with that book that you're talking about. And I'd heard of it, but I've not read it. But, you know, you're kind of, your comments, you know, really get at that idea of what can we commit to in our life?
Yeah.
You know, certainly it's a no-brainer. We need to commit to movement and exercise in our life. We need to commit to some kind of healthy eating and not, you know, abusing drugs and alcohol. We need to commit to certain routines for our health. But what are we going to commit to for our own psychological well-being, or for our own, ultimately for our own happiness, well-being, our social well-being, or, you know, for our meditation well-being, and so on. And so it's things like that book and like these tracks that can help us to find that sense of commitment to something, you know, because it is still going to be, at the end of the day, it's a challenge to stick with exercise or eating right, or in this case, doing some kind of self-regulation practice, or using our strengths. So yeah, a lot of us in the positive psychology world and character strengths world really encourage people to set up routines, to commit, as you mentioned that this author talks about, to commit to a program, to commit to some kind of activity, to try to make the routine, try to make the new activity a routine. And I believe that Happify is really kind of in that right direction for helping people to have things that are fun and engaging that people just want to go to each day. It's very similar to the Luminosity. You know, Luminosity is that popular website for helping people with, you know, with their brain development, improving their memory. And so Happify is a kind of the analogy to Luminosity. It's just that Happify is for positive psychology well-being. Luminosity is for the memory development. You know, both are websites that people go to because they want to, and to make it a routine, make their well-being a priority. And so, yeah, and then to answer your question, Tanisha, I would say that, yeah, easily people can repeat, whether it's my track or explore some of the other meditation tracks, to really get intrigued by different things. And you could skip out of a track if you're midway through it and say, now I just lost my job. And so I need to look at about, you know, one of the tracks that has something to do with workplace, or with trying to kind of rediscover my own passion, or whatever it might be. Or I'm struggling in a relationship, so I'm going to do 3 or 4 of the tracks that deal with relationships and intimacy. So definitely these are things to repeat, I would say, for the rest of our lives. Not that you use Happify the rest of your life, but doing these kinds of activities, just like exercises for life, our positive well-being should also be for the rest of our life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And the social aspects too, like sharing is such a big deal, you know, and like that team mentality, you know, when you see others doing it. And so sharing it, kind of spreads it like a virus.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like a good virus kind of going around. Yeah. And yeah, you could call it positive contagion, kind of that's spreading, the positive snowball effect, getting stronger and stronger, bigger and bigger as the snowball goes down the hill. Yeah, I use the term in the book called a virtuous circle, that mindfulness and mindful awareness, by practicing that, it helps us to be more aware of our strengths, more aware of these good qualities we have. And then when we really start to actually use our strengths, we become more tuned in a mindful way to the subtleties of how they come across and how we might be overusing our humor in a situation and offending people, or how we might be underusing our kindness. And we always thought we were quite kind, but we might be underusing it with this particular person. So we're getting more mindfulness about those nuances, and then that helps us to improve our strengths. So it's really this internal virtuous circle that happens, but I think it also can go outward as well, where when I spot your strengths, Tanisha, and kind of I'm seeing your creativity and curiosity coming out of your questions, and then you might see something in me and give me feedback, and then it kind of becomes this virtuous circle outward as well.
Thank you. Like happy zombie.
Actually, it's interesting because I remember being surprised that curious was in my top 5. And then I found in my languaging that I kept saying, well, I'm curious about this, or I'm curious what you think. Or I kept using the word curious, and like, oh, no wonder why it shows up there in number 5.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think us psychologists have a kind of a, we certainly have that curiosity tendency. We have that, maybe that market cornered for ourselves, not always, but a lot of time. Yeah, it comes up. It's amazing where these strengths come up, because we begin to see, yeah, these are just who we are. And, I noticed that in my emails, I actually will say, well, I'll be curious to hear back from you. I'll be curious what you discover with this. And I'll say things like, I hope to hear from you soon. And in some ways, the sentence is a bit generic. I hope to see you soon. But in other ways, I'm actually expressing my highest character strength, which actually is the strength of hope. So in some ways, it's like we can't even help ourselves from using our strengths. But often it's mindlessly. Often it's not done with mindfulness. We don't know that we're even using those strengths. So it's fascinating when we just put these concepts of mindfulness and strengths to the front of our mind and try to bring them together and think about them. There's so much benefit. There's so much good that can happen from that for ourselves, but also for other people.
Yes, yes. Well, I really would like to see if there's any questions. The rest of you group, you can put it in chat. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. And Tanisha, did you mute people? Maybe they don't know they're muted.
Yeah, I can unmute some folks.
Okay. If there's...
Yeah, can you come over now for a couple minutes? Okay. So what I want to do is
Well, maybe I wasn't supposed to unmute.
All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'll go ahead and because we're almost at the hour anyway, but I really, again, want to thank you, Ryan, for sharing with us today. Excellent presentation, such great information. I know that I will be going back to watch this on YouTube several times for different bits and pieces because you provided us so much information today. So thank you for spending this time with us today, and also for putting together such an amazing presentation. We really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, Jerlyn. My pleasure. Great to be here. An honor to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.